You're watching the Real Football Network. I'm John Pollard, and this is Real Football Analytics. Today we're talking about one of the premier matchups for Week 8 of the NFL season, and that's the 6-0 Denver Broncos hosting the 6-0 Green Bay Packers. You know, interestingly enough, it's only the second time since '07, and only 4 times in the history of the NFL have two teams who have had at least 6 wins and no ties are facing each other. Interestingly enough, Peyton Manning has played in 2 of those games. You may not realize this, but Green Bay, though 6-0, hasn't beaten a team with a winning record year to date. And the Denver Broncos have only beaten one team with a winning record, and that's the Minnesota Vikings. We thought we'd go to the matchup machine to take a closer look at this contest. First off, again, it's one of the most unique matchup machines we've seen year to date. And the fact is, the Green Bay Packers offense, indicated by all the green in the right-hand column, is a heavy favorite versus the Denver Broncos in comparison to the Denver Broncos offense. We move down to the bottom of the chart and we see, again, it switches over. Heavy green to the Denver Broncos defense in comparison to the Green Bay Packers defense. This is why it's a really compelling matchup for us to talk about. Let's jump into some of the offensive categories quickly. First off, for Green Bay, I want to move about halfway down the chart and talk about the pass yards per game. This was a bit of a surprise to all of us at Real Football. The Packers are 22nd in the league in total passing yards year to date, and Aaron Rodgers is 18th in the league in air yards passed downfield. He is throwing the ball into much shorter range. With Jordy Nelson out for the whole season, he's throwing shorter, quicker passes to various running backs and wide receivers and getting the ball out of his hands very quickly. It's an interesting fact that's actually not necessarily impacting the quality of his play, but changing how he's playing. Still very efficient and effective, but much more different than we've seen from Aaron Rodgers in the past few years. This is interesting too. The Packers have only allowed 11 sacks all season, but in the review of the game film, we identified that 4 of those 11 sacks were awarded to Dan Barclay, who was substituting for Brian Bulaga. And Bulaga's back for this game, couldn't come back at a better time as he tries to protect the backside of Aaron Rodgers against that intense defense from the Denver Broncos. Now obviously the matchup machine and the visualizations we're using indicate that Denver is clearly one of the best defenses in the NFL. There's a number of things we wanted to talk about. First of all, Denver has great capability to cover man-to-man. That certainly helps them in terms of defending the run and creating pressure against the quarterback. You may not know this, but Denver actually has 11 different players with at least 1 sack. Where teams are really trying to protect against Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware, there are other players on that defense who are contributing with inside of Wade Phillips' defense to put pressure on the quarterback. That's difficult to defend. Also, Denver has 26 total sacks going into this game and 17 total takeaways. This is going to be a daunting task for the offensive line of the Green Bay Packers and the offensive scheme of the Green Bay Packers to defend and try to progress the ball downfield against the Denver Broncos defense. The last thing I want to talk about is the last thing on the chart with inside the matchup machine, and that's the opponent's third down conversion percentage. The Denver Broncos are second in the league in this category. They have continually put their opponents in third and long situations. Obviously, Green Bay is going to have to fight against that on the road if they're going to be successful against this incredible defense. Now let's transition over and take a look at Peyton Manning's passing chart through the first 7 weeks of the season. Before we do that, I want to quickly revisit the offensive categories for the Denver Broncos within the matchup machine. As we take a look here, big plays per game, the third category down there, last in the league. That's running plays of 10-plus yards and passing plays of 20-plus yards. Sacks allowed, they've done a pretty good job protecting Peyton Manning this year. They're 11th in the league. Total offense, obviously, very low with a lower ranked rushing game and challenges moving the ball downfield in terms of big plays in the air. The total offense is at 29th. And also, again, just to reflect on it a bit more, the rushing yards per game, they're ranked 30th in the league. Now, I do want to mention before we go to Peyton's passing map that Ronnie Hillman did have his best game last week, and perhaps this is something they're going to have to establish on the ground with Ronnie running the ball against Green Bay if they're going to open up opportunities downfield in the air, which we think is important for the success of the Denver Broncos going into this game. Let's move over to Peyton's passing chart. This gives it a great visualization of the anecdotal things people have been talking about Peyton Manning all season, and that's the fact that they believe his arm is tired or his age is affecting the passing game. Let's take a look at the chart. Let's look at the short range passes of 0 to 10 yards. Clearly, this is where Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos throw the ball with the highest frequency and the highest level of impact. We believe that, of course, the Green Bay Packers, studying game film and understanding the Denver Broncos, are going to potentially overplay that short pass. And looking at this, we would suggest there's an opportunity for Peyton to go downfield more in the intermediate range at 11 to 20 yards. People think that he can't throw the ball downfield, but actually, if we look at the numbers, when Peyton's in a clean pocket and he can plant, we believe he can still drive the ball down the field to Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, and he's shown that a couple of times this season. We actually look for him to try to create some route combinations and some mismatches to really go at that intermediate area. Again, clearly they feel comfortable in the short range, but look at intermediate pass opportunities for the Denver Broncos. If they can get that running game going and pull those defenders up a little closer to the line of scrimmage, again, that intermediate passing range could be open for the Broncos. This will be an interesting chess match as we're watching the game on Sunday night. Well, there you have it. Perhaps the most unique matchup machine we've seen all season. A potent offense in the Green Bay Packers facing the #1 defense in the league in the Denver Broncos. Now, for Denver, again, we think Peyton Manning has an opportunity to hit the intermediate passes 11 and 20 yards downfield, and in the settled pocket, we believe he still has the arm to get downfield. It'll also help if they can get Ronnie Hillman and that running game going. You know, for Aaron Rodgers, you can't stop Aaron Rodgers. You can only hope to contain it. Supported by the home crowd, perhaps the Denver Broncos can create some takeaways. And remember, the Denver Broncos have had 3 pick sixes this season and 1 fumble return for a touchdown. Perhaps, again, supported by that home crowd, the Denver Broncos perhaps can create a score on defense. For Real Football Analytics, I'm John Pollard.